Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday. I checked it. It is Tuesday. It's Tuesday now. Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. Once again, time to go out and buy a lottery ticket based on nothing but one number repeating itself twice. Big deal. And actually only repeating itself once, so I don't know. But hey, if you win, by all means, do send us a donation. Why not? What's happening this morning? Well, gosh, there's so much. On the small side, we have the continuing feud between Mark Kelly, senator, astronaut, military man, and you know, the military. They, well, what can I tell you? You've likely heard the news by now. I don't think we discussed it on the show, but he, along with many others, have pointed out the flatly obvious truth that when confronted with, and this is the training, when confronted with an illegal order, officers of the United States military are obligated to disobey, to disregard, at least, those illegal orders. And instead, I don't know. I'm not certain what the training is after that point. But yeah, that they're essentially reminded, as always, when they take their oath initially. And it's on the plaque at West Point. Apparently, everybody's circulating a picture of this. That yeah, you're obligated not to accept those illegal orders. Your oath is to the Constitution, not to your commanding officers personally, or the president personally, for that matter. And as it's been pointed out, well, you know how Donald Trump is, and how Donald Trump type people are. They are insisting that they are opening an investigation into Mark Kelly, and that he could be recalled to active service and face charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which I think would probably pretty quickly dispense, what normally would quickly dispense with the charges, because he hasn't done anything or encouraged anything that isn't part of the oath anyway. But they are pretty sure. Trump, of course, says it's sedition and treason and punishable by death, and now Pete Hic-seth is getting in on the act and harassing Mark Kelly. I guess Kelly issued a photo of himself, took a selfie in the mirror of himself in uniform with all of his medals on, which I imagine was supposed to draw a contrast with, for instance, the drunk idiot who has, you know, more pictures of him boozing it up than in uniform for Pete Hic-seth. And Hic-seth, I guess, decided he could take him to task, though, and write, so quote-unquote captain, quote-unquote captain. So, Captain Kelly, not only did your sedition video intentionally undercut good order and discipline, but you can't even display your uniform correctly. Your medals are out of order and rows reversed. When/if you are recalled to active duty, I'll start with a uniform inspection. And others pointing out in the notes on X, anyway, medals are reversed because it's a mirror image. And here's how mirror imaging works. Mirrors, magnets, there's just no telling what, you know, how the universe works. All right. Well, there's a lot of that going around. I'll mark that one so we can include it in the roundup. But of course, there are some bigger stories going on as well. Stories that I have prepared you for over years and years of repeating that Donald Trump and paperwork do not mix. As I say on the social medias, Trump and paperwork, man, I'm telling you. Pretty much in the end, if you're patient enough, and you can't always afford to be this patient, but if you are patient enough, you will eventually find that anything that Donald Trump purports to have done that you think is wrong, damaging, illegal, hurtful, or whatever, if you have the luxury of time and you do wait, or you're made to wait, you will eventually find that somewhere along the line, the paperwork, the official procedure, whatever may be involved in getting this thing rolling and purportedly accomplished or announced, you will find that there's a mistake somewhere along the line that likely undoes some or some critical part of or all of the purported policy or pronouncement. And it pays off pretty regularly. I can't say it applies to absolutely everything, but I do remind people also when discussing, say, legislative strategy and discussing whether or not you should, give in and reopen the government, things like that. I will say this: there are countervailing values, and there's reasons to want to reopen the government, and they're real and can't be ignored and need to be factored into things. But generally speaking, when you can, wait it out. Don't give in. Don't agree to unanimous consent for anything. I mean, I take it to extremes, and again, it's not always the appropriate response to everything to simply stretch every process out. But I mean, I take it to the extreme of, when a written communication, as they announce them in the House and in the Senate, when they reach the floor of the House or Senate, depending on what's being sent and where, whether it's a nomination or a veto message or some sort of response to an inquiry, and they announce that there is a message from the President of the United States. I don't know whether you should believe it's from the President of the United States. It could be from Stephen Miller, and you should just simply say so and say, to the extent that our unanimous consent is required to accept this as a written communication from the President, I say no. If that has nothing to do with it, and ordinarily it doesn't, because who would dispute that something that's being sent from the White House that purports to be a communication from the President in writing is in fact a communication from the President in writing. But these days you have to. I don't even know if there is a procedure to block that stuff, but you should probably raise a parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, depending on the House that you're in, right? I have to say, I'm not certain the doorman knows what he's got in his hand there. And I think it requires an inquiry before we accept it as it purported to be. Anyway, and the much more regular mainstream of things, yes, don't agree to unanimous consent. Let's not have things go through on a voice vote. Don't waive post-closure time. Why not? Not just because you're fighting to the last minute, but because you're giving things that Trump and his crew have screwed up along the way procedurally and paperwork-wise time to ripen. You have to expose the F-ups. They have to come to light. And sometimes it takes a couple of days. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks. And sometimes it pays off regardless because it's just true and will shake out eventually, I guess we'll say. On that front, what are we talking about? All right. I think you've guessed by now. The district court judge, I guess it's just one judge in this case, has dismissed, for the moment, I mean, it is dismissed without prejudice, so it can be refiled if they can figure out a way to refile it. Dismissed the cases brought in the Eastern District of Virginia against James Comey, former FBI director, and Letitia James, New York Attorney General. Why is she even, being pestered here in Virginia? Well, you remember the whole backstory. Anyway, the upshot of it is exactly what you were warned the upshot of it was going to be. Those indictments were signed by Lindsey Halligan, who purported to be working in the capacity of acting or I don't remember what she was, acting or interim, but it doesn't matter either way. U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. She's not Senate confirmed. She'll never be Senate confirmed, I don't think. But there were questions as to whether or not the administration was entitled to name a new acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. And the answer is not this way. And Lindsey Halligan, being the only one to have signed the indictments for Letitia James and James Comey, there are no longer any valid indictments for either of them. She has been illegally and improperly asserted herself to be the acting U.S. attorney for Eastern District of Virginia. So those indictments are unsigned, therefore they're not indictments. And in Comey's case, of course, that means the statute of limitations on his alleged crimes have expired. Now, there have been some discussions about whether or not there are mechanisms with which by which a enterprising and competent prosecutor might be able to revive those charges. It will not cause the same problems in the Letitia James case, but they'll have to go back around again and try and get an indictment validly signed for them. And I think they might be able to make that happen. But it also is happening, and here's another good reason to draw this stuff out. One, this was a good reason to draw this out for Letitia James is you might get the charges against you dismissed. But secondly, it's become so clear that their case is incredibly weak and that it's being literally trumped up, no pun necessarily intended here, but that Bill Pulte, the driving force behind the allegations for which James finds herself charged with mortgage fraud and related subjects, Bill Pulte is himself under investigation for the methods and manner in which he brought this information forward about Letitia James, and so is Ed Martin, and that's going to just further undermine the case and will be certainly of extreme interest should this thing ever get charged properly and proceed to trial. So, it's exciting to watch this happening. It's, kind of incredible that it has happened. Let me give you a look at some of the early reaction to it. Let's see. I mentioned to you yesterday as background part of the story about prosecutors quizzing witnesses on Ed Martin and Bill Pulte and their moves against Adam Schiff. But this is just the third of three similar cases they were hoping to bring against Letitia James, Lisa Cook, and Adam Schiff. The James Comey case, not based on the same fact pattern or the same allegations, but just poorly done and I guess improperly brought entirely. All right. So in addition to that background, we have let's read these things. Let's see. I've got from Joyce White Vance, one of the early reactors on Blue Sky to the situation, writing just that Judge Cameron Currie has dismissed the Comey prosecution because Lindsey Halligan was improperly appointed as U.S. attorney. And with a screenshot of the first page of the order, makes it pretty clear. So the technical language here is that on September 25th, 2025, Lindsey Halligan, a former White House aide with no prior prosecutorial experience, this is the opinion and order from the judge, just throwing that in there, appeared before a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia, having been appointed interim, that's interesting, U.S. attorney by the Attorney General just days before. Ms. Halligan secured a 2-count indictment charging former FBI Director James B. Comey Jr. with making false statements to Congress and obstructing a congressional proceeding. Mr. Comey now moves to dismiss the indictment on the ground that Ms. Halligan, the sole prosecutor who presented the case to the grand jury, was unlawfully appointed in violation of 28 U.S. Code Section 546 and the Constitution's Appointments Clause. As I explained below, I agree with Mr. Comey that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid. And because Ms. Halligan had no lawful authority to present the indictment, I will grant Mr. Comey's motion and dismiss the indictment without prejudice. Da-da-da-da. There you go. Oh, wait, we have that somewhere, don't we? That's the Imperial margarine. Yeah, all right. Well, there's no margarine in the offing here, but, well, that's the end of the case this time around. Again, that doesn't mean that it's all over. Let me dive back into Instapaper and tell you what I mean here. Let's see. There's the New York Times article on the subject, and then there was some discussion of it by online lawyers. Let's see what the New York Times tells us in their write-up, and then whether or not we need to supplement that with discussion from elsewhere. This is one of those update pages that keeps changing the story every few hours. So, oh, darn. Well, I thought there was a permalink to that one. Because right up at the top now is our first story. Pentagon investigates senator over video Trump claimed was seditious. I would say we need to just say that they purport to be investigating him, because we don't really know whether that's something that's actually going forward. Now, let's see if I can scroll back a little bit and find this stuff. Wow, there's a interesting other bunch of stories as well, and would make good reading and probably could fill out a show. Let's see. Let's see, some Obamacare subsidies issues. That's good news to hear about. Some shutdown fallout, some Epstein stories. Well, it's annoying that this is taking too long to get to the story that we wanted. I don't know why the Times presents things this way and makes it difficult to get where you wanted to go. Here we go. All right, so here's the perma link of it here. Let me open it up elsewhere so that we can mark it correctly and send it along. Judge dismisses case against Comey and James, finding Trump prosecutor was unlawfully appointed. The decision is the setback for the president's efforts to wield the criminal justice system against his perceived enemies, which is good because you're not supposed to be wielding the criminal justice system against your perceived enemies. So a setback in that would be great. Alan Feuer and Devlin Barrett, who likely know that and might not have written the headline, are the authors of the piece. A federal judge on Monday tossed out separate criminal charges against the former FBI director, James B. Comey, who we now know to be a junior as well, and New York's Attorney General Letitia James, saying the loyalist prosecutor installed by President Trump to bring the cases was put into her job unlawfully. Why? Bad paperwork. Basically, they just didn't understand the limitations of the law. They didn't read the paper that told them what they could and couldn't do. The twin rulings by Judge Cameron Currie were the most significant setback to the president's effort to force the criminal justice system. That's an interesting way to put it. To force the criminal justice system to punish his perceived foes. The case dismissal also served as a rebuke to Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had rushed to carry out Mr. Trump's orders to appoint the prosecutor, Lindsey Halligan, as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. But, of course, you can't rush that. You want her to actually be the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, or any other district for that matter. You got to get it through the Senate. And they were busy or doing something else. All right. The dismissals, while embarrassing for the White House and the Justice Department, are unlikely to be the last word on an issue of constitutional authority that many legal experts expect could be appealed to the Supreme Court, where they could, of course, do anything. Oh, statute of limitations? We don't believe in that anymore. Oh, you have to be a U.S. attorney or a practicing federal prosecutor of some sort in order to indict somebody? Well, why can't ordinary citizens send in cereal box tops to effect a federal indictment? Why not? The dismissals are, like, as I said, embarrassing, but unlikely to be the last word. How so? The way Judge Currie rendered her decision left open the possibility that another prosecutor could refile the charges against both Mr. Comey and Ms. James. Or, in fact, it could be Lindsey Halligan if they somehow get her appointed and approved by the Senate, I suppose. But no one wants to talk about that possibility right now. Judge Currie's orders center on Mr. Trump's unorthodox decision to appoint Ms. Halligan to her prosecutorial position in an interim capacity, replacing his previous pick, who was also serving in a temporary role. And that's really where the problem lies, I think. If my understanding is that they need to center that. It's not so much that it was an unorthodox decision. It's that you already had your chance to appoint an interim person, and they quit on you, or you fired them, or you told them you were going to fire them, so they quit. And, you know, that doesn't mean you can just keep nominating different interim people. You got to, at some point, go to the Senate and ask them to approve the idiot you want to be in this job. Within days after assuming her new post, Ms. Halligan rejected the advice of career prosecutors in her new office and moved single-handedly to indict both Mr. Comey and Ms. James, two of the president's most reviled targets. In her rulings on Monday, Judge Currie said that it was unlawful to appoint two interim prosecutors in succession and dismissed the charges against Mr. Comey and Ms. James without prejudice. which, of course, means that they can be filed again. You dismiss them with prejudice. That's supposed to be a final bar to them being presented again. Ms. Bondi said at a news conference on Monday that the Justice Department would take, quote, all available legal action, including an immediate appeal. The dismissal of charges without prejudice meant the government could also try to refile them, whatever the outcome of the ultimate legal fight over the appointment of Ms. Halligan, a former White House aide and personal lawyer to Mr. Trump. So that's interesting there. First, going to appeal on the basis that, no, that was allowed to appoint her. And then I guess after that, or maybe simultaneously, they could try, well, even if it wasn't legal to appoint her, the indictment should still stand, or someone else can bring the indictment, or, I don't know what else they might come up with. They could be imaginative, and I guess if they have a pretend Supreme Court that will approve anything, you might as well throw a couple of Bitcoins and free pizzas in there as well. In a statement, a lawyer for Mr. Comey, Patrick J. Fitzgerald, just a lawyer for Mr. Comey, said that with the dismissal of the case against his client, an independent judiciary vindicated our system of laws, not just for Mr. Comey, but for all American citizens. Well, that remains to be seen. Ms. James's lawyer, Abby Lowell, was also just a regular American lawyer, but, not in the same way as Patrick Fitzgerald, said the court ruling showed Mr. Trump went to extreme measures to substitute one of his allies to bring the baseless charges after career prosecutors refused. This case was not about justice or the law. It was about targeting the Attorney General James, for what she stood for and who she challenged. Judge Currie's ruling stems from a series of machinations that Mr. Trump undertook earlier this fall. Her legal rationale was based in part on a decision by another federal judge, Aileen M. Cannon. Remember her? She's back in the news as well. To dismiss an indictment against Mr. Trump over concerns about the appointment of Jack Smith as special counsel in that case. In late September, he rushed to oust Ms. Halligan's predecessor, Eric S. Siebert, the career U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, who had expressed concern that there was not sufficient evidence to indict Mr. Comey and Ms. James. The president then replaced Mr. Siebert with Ms. Halligan, who had no previous experience as a prosecutor. When Ms. Halligan did the president's bidding by hurrying to charge Mr. Comey and Ms. James, it was a generational erosion in the tradition of the White House keeping distance from the affairs of the Justice Department. That's gently put. The indictment she secured against Mr. Comey, which, by the way, she did not secure against Mr. Comey, charged him with lying to and obstructing Congress during testimony he gave in September 2020 about whether, as FBI director, he had authorized leaks to the media about sensitive political investigations. Not long after Ms. James was charged with bank fraud and making false statements in loan documents for a home she had purchased in Norfolk, Virginia. Ms. James said in a written statement that she was, quote, heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support I have received from around the country. The manner in which the judge dismissed the Comey indictment could now lead to a legal fight over whether the government can try to refile the charges with another grand jury. Mr. Comey was indicted just days before the 5-year statute of limitations was set to run on any charges stemming from his congressional testimony. His lawyers and a magistrate judge have said the statute has now expired, meaning charges could not be refiled. Government prosecutors, however, have argued in court that the statute has not expired because the clock was essentially paused when the indictment was returned. Mr. Comey's legal team signaled Monday it was likely to fight any attempt to revive the case, insisting that the statute of limitations had run. Judge Currie said that Mr. Trump and his Attorney General, Ms. Bondi, had circumvented the law through the manner in which Ms. Halligan was elevated to oversee one of the country's most important federal prosecutors' offices. The judge noted that both Ms. Halligan and Mr. Siebert had been serving in an interim capacity, but the Attorney General is permitted to appoint only one interim U.S. attorney to serve for a temporary 120-day period, Judge Currie noted. The law does not permit the appointment of successive interim prosecutors, the judge said, or else the White House could simply keep installing pliant people in powerful positions and get around the constitutional requirement for the Senate to confirm them. Yes. Judge Currie wrote that if she did not dismiss the indictments, the consequences to the criminal justice system would be enormous. It would mean the government could send any private citizen off the street, attorney or not, into the grand jury room to secure an indictment so long as the Attorney General gives her approval after the fact, she wrote. That cannot be the law. In the short term, the decision led to some confusion among prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia. After the ruling, supervisors told employees to use the name of Ms. Halligan's deputy in their court filings instead of hers. Then they reversed course and told prosecutors to continue using Ms. Halligan's name. You can imagine why that would have happened. It could have just been, venality, pride. But remember, they are in the middle of saying, anyway, that they're going to appeal this ruling, and it's their belief that she is validly, in the first instance, appointed as interim U.S. attorney. So they're going to insist that that's the case. And if they are substituting the deputy's name for hers when they go into court, if in their appeal, someone is going to say, if you believe that she's validly the U.S. attorney, as you say you do here in front of the court today, why did you substitute her deputy's name in for all documents in between then and now? Oh, belt and suspenders. Patrick Cotter, a former federal prosecutor now in private practice in Chicago, said the judge's rulings were not particularly surprising. The rationale the judge puts forward as to why this was an unconstitutional appointment is pretty sound. It's just logic, he said. Mr. Cotter, Mr. Cotter, it's spelled with a C, by the way, said dismissing the charges without prejudice means the charges could be refiled with another grand jury, and gave prosecutors options to try to revive the cases. They've got them. What are they? We can discuss them, but first, our first break is coming up, and I realize I have left my alarms elsewhere, so I'll go grab them during the break, but at least I had an eye on the clock. So what else does Mr. Cotter have to say? Under current federal law, when an indictment is dismissed, the government has 6 months to try to refile charges, and it may be even longer because of appeals, he said. Mr. Cotter said the rulings would probably put on hold other legal fights over whether the James and Comey cases were vindictive prosecutions of political foes, but those could be revived if the administration's appeal proved successful. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's continue with the New York Times recital of what happened in the district courts in Eastern Virginia yesterday. We left off by reading through the discussion from one Mr. Cotter, not with a K like the television show, but Patrick C., that is Cotter. I don't know what his middle initial is. Maybe it's also C, but it begins with a C. Former federal prosecutor now in private practice in Chicago, saying, well, it's not over till it's over. Basically, and that in addition to their appeals, there's also the fact that under current federal law, when an indictment is dismissed, the government has 6 months to try to refile charges. Now, there'll be an argument about whether or not the statute of limitations should preclude that, or whether you get 6 months on top of the statute of limitations, or under what circumstances you might get such an extension. And, of course, pointing out that if there is such an extension, it might even last even longer because of appeals of other issues along the way. Mr. Cotter said the rulings would probably put on hold other legal fights over whether the James and Comey cases were vindictive prosecutions of political foes. That's another basis on which both of them were looking to dismiss the indictments. But those cases could be revived. That is to say, they'll make some arguments in court about that and see if they can get the indictments dismissed on that basis. If it becomes necessary, if a court were to rule later on, well, we can revive these charges against both of them, they'll both come back with another pretty strong argument that they should be dismissed. Such challenges, based on the argument that someone has been unfairly prosecuted for political or personal reasons, are rarely successful in court. But in these cases, Mr. Trump had publicly demanded charges after career prosecutors had looked at the evidence and said it did not rise to a determination of criminal conduct. So, that becomes part of the evidence that they'll consider in this smaller issue. Well, this discrete issue, we'll say. It's a very big issue, but it's a discrete issue of whether or not these things can be fairly labeled to have been improper discrimination, personal, vindictive prosecution. And, when there's a record of memos going back and forth between multiple people saying, no, there's just no there, you should not bring this case, you'll lose this case. Well, I'm telling you, it's my professional opinion, you're going to lose this case. And they're very experienced prosecutors, and instead the brand new people who have never prosecuted any cases at all say, well, I think there is plenty of evidence. And on top of that, that enough by itself won't be enough. They'll just say, well, you just have a very dumb U.S. attorney, that's all. Except that person also wasn't the U.S. attorney. That will also complicate things, I think, just a little bit. And, of course, I guess you could weigh it this way. Probably nobody going to bother to make this argument because it doesn't bear on it directly. But I suppose if you were to say, well, if there are two conflicting interpretations and one comes from an experienced prosecutor and one comes from someone who's never prosecuted any cases whatsoever, why would you believe the inexperienced person? It's something that you could weigh, but it's not absolutely determinative all by itself. The inexperienced person could be right the first time out of the box. The experienced person could be wrong despite all the experience. I guess you could also add, well, this is a person who also interpreted, I think, very clear statute to be read in a way that said that their appointment to the job was on a firm foundation and quite in compliance with the law, when in fact it's the absolute opposite. And it was a very easy call for the court to make. So it's not just that they're inexperienced, it's that their first experience out of the box in interpreting statute was way off the mark. So why do we believe that they're able to interpret other statutes? Well, it's only strike one. They'll consider these things, but I don't think it's going to go very well. And then when you have memos back and forth saying, really, don't do this. If you do, it's going to look like a political, personally vindictive prosecution. Well, the hell with that. I don't care what it looks like. I'm doing it anyway. That'll cause problems. So let's see. Judge Currie, an appointee of President Bill Clinton, who normally sits in South Carolina, by the way, was assigned to hear the question of Ms. Halligan's appointment after the local federal judges were forced to step back to avoid any appearance of conflict in deciding the fate of the U.S. attorney they routinely deal with. And that probably, we should also mention, not only would it be a U.S. attorney that they routinely deal with, which, that makes sense, it would cause problems, and bring in somebody else from outside so that if they decide that this person shouldn't be U.S. attorney and isn't U.S. attorney, but the Supreme Court later makes up a reason as to why, then Lindsey Halligan has perhaps more reason than most, I guess, being that she's also in the middle of conducting 2, 3, 5 vindictive targeted malicious prosecutions. She'll also, I guess she's just one of those people that responds to that kind of stimuli, that kind of stimulus, and would say, well, I now have reason to be personally angry at this judge who sits on the court I deal with all the time. But if she doesn't deal with South Carolina, then it won't come to pass. But in addition, the judges of the Eastern District of Virginia have an official interest in well, making sure that there's really a validly appointed U.S. attorney for their district. But it goes beyond just wanting things to be done correctly. If the president's and attorney general's authority to name a second interim U.S. attorney is non-existent, you've named one, you've burned that name for whatever reason, now you need a new person, but the rule is they have to be appointed correctly, i.e., in this case, since you've had an interim, you got to go to the Senate. What happens in the meantime while you're waiting for the Senate? Because the Senate can dawdle and drag its feet, right? Intentionally or otherwise. And the answer is, well, in some cases, if there is a first deputy assistant, that person can step in. And if not, the other option is for the judges of the federal district court in that district to get together and nominate somebody. And their authority is what you're leaning on for putting somebody into an interim position. I don't know whether there's discussion, and it may be the case that, well, if the attorney general names an interim U.S. attorney, and then that person doesn't, or their term expires, or they're gone, or they're fired in the case of Siebert, whatever the case may be. I don't know whether the court at that point has the authority to name another interim, or whether the rule is against a second interim following an interim appointment, or whether it's simply, well, the president and attorney general have exhausted their options, and now the court in a different branch. It makes sense to me that a different branch gets a crack at naming somebody in that instance. But if you can't have two interims, then presumably the next highest ranking person, under the Vacancies Act, moves into that job. But yeah, that's another potential conflict. If the power to name the next interim, or I suppose acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, lies in the hands of the judges of the Eastern District of Virginia, you could say, well, that's a little too personal a connection, even though, no one judge has all of that power by themselves. Might be another reason to bring somebody in from South Carolina. But anyway, we left off with this here. Other federal judges have already ruled that Mr. Trump's Justice Department unlawfully used similar procedural maneuvers to put loyalists in place at 3 other U.S. attorneys' offices. And I think at least 2 offhand by now of which ones they are. Those include Alina Habba, of course, who was put in charge of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, Sigal Chattah, who was named the acting U.S. Attorney for Nevada. Have we mentioned that one? And Bilal Assaili, whom Mr. Trump put in the top job at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Central District of California. And I think we haven't even gotten around to the Northern District of New York, which had a similar problem. Have they resolved that one, or did they just leave that one out, overlook that one? And there's probably, it's probably a safe bet to say there's probably a half dozen more just like that elsewhere that just haven't made the papers yet. There's 90-something districts, right? So it'd be a safe bet to say that they screwed up in 6 more. Probably more than that. But Ms. Halligan's involvement in the James and Comey cases, which is funny because, of course, James Comey is his name, and Letitia James is her name, but the James thing keeps screwing me up. Well, yeah, it's James Comey. James and Comey. Well, yeah, they're both his name. Oh, I see what you mean. Halligan's involvement in both of those cases was in many ways unique. In both matters, she appeared alone in front of the grand juries that returned indictments, and she was the sole prosecutor to have formally signed the charging documents. Because no other colleagues joined her in presenting to grand juries, Judge Currie ruled that the indictments she secured were invalid. And why was there nobody with her? Normally there is, but nobody agreed with trying to get an indictment in this case because they thought there was no there, which is going to play into the question of malicious prosecution. Although the charges against Ms. Comey and Ms. James were brought separately, their lawyers joined forces in challenging Ms. Halligan's appointment. It just made good sense. And guess what? Together, they won the day. But it may only be the day. I think those issues were spelled out in general. But I will add this. I think we've heard this before, but I will add this reminder as I saw Adam Bonin circulating this one on Blue Sky too, with the commentary. It is absolutely delightful, Adam says, that part of the reason this indictment is being dismissed is because a 1986 Department of Justice OLC, Office of Legal Counsel memo, authored by then Deputy Assistant Attorney General Samuel Alito, insisted that this was the proper outcome and appointments like Halligan's were invalid. So there you go. And I guess a quote from the opinion in footnote 14 here says that 3 days after Congress enacted the 1986 law, an Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, memorandum authored by then Deputy Assistant Attorney General Samuel Alito concluded the statute does not allow the Attorney General to make another appointment pursuant to subsection A after the expiration of the 120-day period. Then the citation doesn't really matter that much. The statutory plan, Alito reasoned, disclosed a congressional purpose that after the expiration of the 120-day period, further interim appointments are to be made by the court, there's our answer, rather than by the Attorney General. You go to the other branch. Otherwise, it just allows the president to keep doing this over and over and over again. And why bother nominating anybody or reserving any role for the Senate and all of that. Also commenting on that situation, Mark Joseph Stern. Let's see what I put aside on this one. I think they're talking about the technicalities that might revive the case. Kyle Cheney, or I don't know whether he says Cheney, as others have said that's the name's pronunciation, but Kyle reports on this thing saying, Judge Currie basically slams the door on re-indicting Comey here. She notes that, quote, there is no legitimate peg to extend the expired September 30th statute of limitations. The window for James is a little wider, according to this Politico article that, well, according to the opinion, which he shows a screen grab of and links to his Politico reporting on. Is it Kyle's own Politico reporting? Is he a Politico guy? I don't even know. I just see him on Blue Sky. Yeah, Kyle Cheney and Josh Gerstein reporting on the subject here. But, and he's highlighting this language where the judge says similarly here, the Attorney General's attempt to ratify Mr. Comey's indictment on October 31st came too late in the day to be effective, as the statute of limitations for the charged offenses expired 31 days earlier on September 30th. Whatever. I mean, it's an interesting stab at it, but here, Mark Joseph Stern chimes in, senior writer at Slate covering the courts and law, by the way. And he says he respectfully disagrees with Kyle here. Currie says Bondi couldn't ratify Halligan's indictment after the statute of limitations. She does not say that a future validly appointed U.S. attorney, interim or otherwise, is barred from bringing a new indictment under Section 3288. Whichever, don't tell me what, actually it's in the screen grab. And she leaves that possibility open. So it's just that Halligan was improperly appointed. And I guess if you give them 6 months, let's say you use that hook to give them 6 months to refile after the dismissal, and you get somebody in there who's a validly appointed U.S. attorney, interim or otherwise, who can do that, and then you'd be able to go ahead and do it. And, this is why it's important to parse this stuff carefully so that these things don't jump out and surprise you. The mention of Section 3288, as it happens, the screen grab that Kyle uses includes that. With this introductory language, the government responds that the Attorney General's ratification was proper because she could have personally obtained a new indictment on October 31st using the grace period set forth in, and that's the section, 18 U.S. Code Section 3288. And I guess that's the 6 months thing that was earlier mentioned. So it's possible that, okay, Halligan, she's not really the U.S. attorney. She brings this indictment. She brings it into court. They say, you're not actually the U.S. attorney. Case dismissed. The argument here is, well, all right, she was the only one that signed it. But the Attorney General herself could have signed it. She didn't. But if you have 6 months to refile and they just refile it and then Pam Bondi signs it, it would be okay. Or a validly appointed interim U.S. attorney for the same district could do the same. Section 3288 provides, in part, whenever an indictment or information charging a felony is dismissed for any reason after the period prescribed by the applicable statute of limitations is expired, a new indictment may be returned in the appropriate jurisdiction within 6 calendar months if the date of the dismissal of the indictment, 6 months of the date of the dismissal or the indictment of information. So that's pretty open door. So it'd be important to keep that in mind. Mark goes on, by the way, and says, as a practical matter, it may be that no validly appointed U.S. attorney will be willing to indict Comey. That's why Trump installed Halligan in the first place. But nothing in today's decision, as I read it, bars them from trying, which means, of course, they'll try. Put differently, the judge says Bondi couldn't ratify Halligan's invalid indictment after the statute of limitations had run. The judge did not say that a future U.S. attorney is prohibited from bringing a new valid indictment within the 6-month grace period prescribed by law. So there you go. And he then gives his validation by saying exactly right to Brad Heath. Brad Heath makes this comment. Who's Brad, by the way? Brad Heath is the D.C. reporter for Reuters on crime, justice, and investigations. Brad says there's at least an argument that the dismissal will give DOJ more time to bring new charges against Comey, and this time to avoid the landmines it seems to have stepped on, really jumped up, down, stomped on, jumped on with a pogo stick on its first attempt. So there you go. You get the 6-month thing. So, all right, you're fairly warned there, and I think you should keep it in mind. Other things happening in and around the courtrooms. There's more. I mentioned there was more about Aileen Cannon. I got here something from Talking Points memo, which I need to remind myself of. See what we're reading here, just so we can remember what she's up to and keep an eye on her. It's getting a little crazy. Aileen Cannon is back in a bad sequel to her Trump debut. All right, David Kurtz wrote this up just yesterday, and I see this looks like it's going to be one of those compound articles that hits a number, like sort of a roundup, and we'll have to we'll probably only notice after the fact that we've wandered into a new story, because there's more about not just the James Comey cases, but there's also Abrego Garcia and Kash Patel involved in this roundup. A lot of things happened, and this is their usual subheader. A lot of things happened, so here are some of the things. This is TPM's Morning Memo, Investigating the Investigators, Aileen Cannon edition. Incisive new reporting from Charlie Savage, and that probably is what we need to be reading for more in-depth stuff, on the sprawling The sprawling Investigate the Investigators charade going on in South Florida puts U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon back in the thick of things. What's emerged in the last few weeks is that Miami U.S. Attorney Jason A. Redding Quinones, and by the way, I think we were speculating the other day on whether or not the latest charges being brought against a member of Congress, a Democratic member of Congress, were in fact, is that what it was? Were being brought by the new Miami U.S. Attorney, and it was in fact Redding Quinones. And I think I put the story away in Instapaper, but I don't know if anything will jump out and distinguish it. But in case you were wondering, in case we didn't close that loop, now we can. So, as we were saying, what's emerged in the last few weeks is that Miami U.S. Attorney Jason A. Redding Quinones is overseeing a criminal investigation that stretches all the way back to the 2016 election. He has reportedly issued subpoenas to investigators of the 2016 Trump-Russia connection, including former CIA Director John Brennan, and FBI counterintelligence official Peter Strzok, and former FBI attorney Lisa Page, two of Trump's favorite targets in the 2020 election campaign, by the way. What's new from Savage? All right, well, rather than, I guess, read it, is he going to give us a summary? What's new from Savage? Redding Quinones has impaneled an extra grand jury where? Fort Pierce, Florida. Not Miami, Fort Pierce, where only Judge Cannon of Mar-a-Lago case fame can oversee it. He has not said why he is putting an extra grand jury 130 miles away in Judge Cannon's courthouse, Savage reports. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has been supervising Redding Quiñones' investigation of the investigators through a low-level official in the Deputy Attorney General's, DAG's office, named Christopher James DeLorenz, who was a Cannon law clerk until August of 2024, according to Savage. That's very interesting, too. Not necessarily the case that, the lone district court judge from a, backwater section of the Southern District of Florida ends up in the Deputy Attorney General's office working on a case involving his former boss. But okay, it can happen. Cannon's oversight of the extra grand jury means she is, quote, in charge of disputes like requests by recipients of subpoenas to quash them on grounds ranging from an expired statute of limitations to claims of privilege or requests by prosecutors to compel such witnesses to testify under threat of being jailed for contempt of court. Savage reports. We really should be reading Charlie's full article. Maybe we will. If Mike Davis, they get a little colorful here. Let's say what euphemism do we use? This is very childlike. We'll do this way. The poop stirring conservative legal activist. Yeah, the big bad S word. Right here in the Talking Points memo. I can't believe it. If Mike Davis, the stirring conservative legal activist, is to be believed, the Fort Pierce grand jury is being used to advance a grand theory that the deep state... Wait, that dramatic music. What's the theory? The deep state conspired to deprive Donald Trump of his civil rights. That's why they were investigating the Trump-Russia connection, they say. Davis was more coy with the New York Times. Cannon, of course, interfered with the criminal investigation of Trump in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case before he was indicted, then was randomly assigned his case and dismissed the indictment entirely after slow rolling the case for months. The chance to use a grand jury under Cannon's auspices to run an open-ended investigation pegged to the Mar-a-Lago search that sweeps up all Trump grievances, paybacks, and scores to settle dating all the way back to the 2016 election has the potential to be the most dangerous and damaging of Trump's many investigator retributions. Oh, gosh. Calling it the investigator retributions just makes for awkward reading. But there's a little bit more here, and I think we'll just add the rest of his roundup here to the mix. The Retribution, James Comey edition. Former FBI Director James Comey on Friday filed a new motion to dismiss the indictment against him, rolling up all of the revelations over the course of the last week about the unusual and perhaps fatally flawed handling of the grand jury by interim U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan. That's not the issue of her being invalidly appointed, although, it's related. She should never have been in the job for a number of reasons. And in fact, she wasn't in the job for a very different reason. But while she was not in the job, she not only tried to indict James Comey, but she also may, in fact, have indulged in a little bit, anywhere between a little bit and a great deal of prosecutorial misconduct in the way she dealt with the grand jury, minus the fact, of course, that she wasn't, in fact, a prosecutor at the time. So that would be interesting if that saved her. You can't charge me with prosecutorial misconduct. I wasn't really the prosecutor. Maybe. Next note here is the big revelation in the Abrego Garcia case. And by the way, does everybody remember what the prosecutorial misconduct was? There were missing pages representing several hours, I guess, of the grand jury proceedings when the judge asked to review these things. Give me the transcript from the grand jury, and there were just huge gaps in it. And then it turns out that among the gaps were questions and answers between the jurors and the prosecutors as to what does the Fifth Amendment mean and how can it be used. And what else did they do? Oh, yes, that's right. Then there was the matter of sending out an indictment that wasn't what the grand jury had agreed to, and then finally handing over a signed indictment that hadn't been reviewed and voted upon by the grand jury. So the prosecutor isn't properly appointed. The statute of limitations is run. The indictment paperwork is screwed up, and they never present the indictment to the grand jury to vote on it. So almost nothing about this case is valid. In addition to the fact that the career prosecutor said, even if you had done it all validly, you would lose. So, it's not looking so good. Let's see. There was also a big revelation in the Abrego Garcia case, apparently. And I don't know whether we got to it or not, but let's take a look. In a statement to the Washington Post on Friday, Costa Rica Security Minister Mario Zamora Cordero blew up the Trump administration's deeply misleading representations to the judge in one of the Abrego Garcia cases. And there's like 15 because they screwed all of that up too. Trump and paperwork, man. Zamora Cordero said Costa Rica's offer from August to accept Abrego Garcia and give him legal status still stands, which flies in the face of claims by the Trump administration that Costa Rica will no longer accept him. The Trump administration is insisting on deporting him to one of several African countries, most recently Liberia. Hadn't heard that one, to which, of course, he has no previous ties. As I wrote at length last week, says David, not me, the Trump administration has repeatedly defied court orders to provide a fact witness who can attest in court to its representations about Costa Rica. And that's just one of the things that they're consistently lying about and not providing any fact witnesses, and not just just in the Abrego Garcia case. It's happening elsewhere, to be sure, but this is like the second or third issue in the course of the Abrego Garcia case says alone, in which judges have said, listen, we got to get a fact witness in here from the government to tell me what the effing F happened. That is still a big part of the Abrego Garcia case with Judge Boasberg, who's going ahead with contempt investigations because he kept asking for somebody to come and tell me where the hell is he and where the hell is his plane. And I said, turn it around. Why didn't you do it? Give me the timeline, and you keep lying to me about it. Abrego Garcia's lawyers immediately notified the judge in his civil case of the new reporting from the Washington Post, and his lawyers in his criminal case cited the report as additional evidence that his prosecution is, you'll never guess, vindictive. Weird. Alrighty, welcome back everyone to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on with David Kurtz's summary of, the top items happening in the total destruction of the Department of Justice and the entire legal system by Donald Trump administration. So we left off in the middle of the big revelation in the Abrego Garcia case, or at least the latest one. Abrego Garcia's lawyers immediately notified a judge in his civil case about this new reporting from the Washington Post about the administration continuing to lie about who will and won't accept him, and misrepresenting the position of Costa Rica, insisting instead that he needed to go to Liberia or somewhere else in Africa for no real reason. And his lawyers in his criminal case cited the report as additional evidence that his prosecution is vindictive, punishment for having exercised his legal rights to challenge the wrongful removal from the United States to El Salvador earlier this year. They just can't stop violating the law with respect to Abrego Garcia. Next up, special protection for Kash Patel's girlfriend. I mentioned this briefly. We didn't read the article yet, but just a reminder because we haven't read the article yet. FBI Director Kash Patel enlisted 2 SWAT-trained FBI agents in Atlanta to protect his aspiring country music singer girlfriend at the NRA's annual convention last spring. The New York Times reports. That's a new twist on it. Of course, why would you need SWAT team protection at an NRA convention? Everybody there is a good guy with a gun, except they're also not allowed to carry their guns at an NRA convention, which I guess means they're all unsafe, which is why you have to have a SWAT team. See, it all makes sense. And then let's see. A few more items. Arizona fake electors case not completely dead yet. I think we heard a little bit about this the other day. Attorney General Chris Mayes in Arizona announced that she will ask the state's Supreme Court to revive the Trump 2020 fake electors case that was tossed out by the trial judge. What else is there? Epstein files. Do we already know about this one? Trump DOJ has renewed its previously rejected request for a federal judge in Florida to unseal the grand jury testimony related to Jeffrey Epstein and his confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell. In a new motion filed late Friday, the Trump DOJ cited the recently passed law demanding that the department release its Epstein files as the basis for renewing its request to the court. So what is this? I guess this is their response to the bill that was passed and signed, which paralleled the one that was discharged by the petition filed by Tom Massey, but not the very same bill. It's a very slightly different one. So what does this mean? Renewed its previously rejected. Okay, so the Trump DOJ, for whatever reason, claims to be asking a federal judge already to unseal grand jury testimony in that case. The federal judge had blocked it, and they're now back in court saying the new law says we have to release the files. We want you to release this grand jury testimony, unseal it as part of our effort to comply with this new law. I don't know where that's going to go, just because I don't know how the Epstein files are defined anyway in the bill that was just recently passed. And I don't know whether grand jury materials are a necessary part of it or not. Anyway, under the same heading, it says here, meanwhile, Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton, maybe he's the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, I don't know, faces a slew of complications, including a potential conflict of interest in responding to the baldly political directive, that's in quotes, that he received from Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate only Democrats' connections to Epstein, Politico reports. And I'm sure you remember Trump insisting that there should be such an investigation. And that, too, will likely come up in various and sundry vindictive prosecution claims, both for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I would say. Well, are they doing it to me? Normally you would say no, but in the atmosphere in which we're also seeing it happen to Democrats involved in one way or another in the Epstein files, and to James Comey, and to Letitia James, and to Adam Schiff, and to Lisa Cook. Don't you think it's possible it might have happened to me too? Let's see. What else have we got here? Alito reinstates Texas's pro-GOP map. I think we missed this story. Justice Samuel Alito issued a temporary administrative stay, allowing Texas to continue using its new pro-GOP congressional district map, while the Supreme Court considers whether to put a lower court ruling throwing out the map on hold while the state's appeal proceeds. And then, of course, it's a couple of other things. Do we want to wander into these? Venezuela watch, the corruption. A pardon edition. You know what? There is good pardon information here. That is to say, information about a bad pardon, which happened. What's the Venezuela watch? Since taking office 10 months ago, the Trump White House has repeatedly steamrolled or sidestepped government lawyers, not again, who questioned its lethal high sea strikes on alleged drug traffickers. The Washington Post reports. We know about that. We'll see what detail there might be that we can share. Joint Chiefs Chair Dan Kane is visiting the region today. That would have been yesterday, meeting with U.S. service members in Puerto Rico. And Trump administration is poised to affix the label foreign terrorist organization on Venezuela's Cartel de los Soles, which experts say is neither a cartel nor a group nor even a hierarchy. So you tell me where that one is going to go. Perhaps we should read a little bit about that just because of the absurdity of it. Now, on the pardon front, let me see. In Instapaper, I think I put aside a video, another like TikTok style video from Liz Oyer, who was the pardon attorney during the last administration, who is keeping a close eye on these things, of course, and doing a great job making succinct reports about them. Let me transfer it to the big computer here so I can play it for you with decent audio. And it's interesting. She, I don't know. She recognizes who's involved here, but it's not her top line headline. Whereas in the TPM summary, and in any summary I would have written about it, I would have called this out first and foremost, but you'll see where it goes. We're going to call out the name of some rogues gallery all-stars from a little ways back, that, again, for you and I would have jumped into the headline, but is just mentioned along the way as Liz Oyer describes things. Go ahead. Let me roll her YouTube short as it is here. Do I have to hit the volume button?
Hey, everybody.
No, okay.
Donald Trump's latest pardon is going to blow your mind. I'm Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice.
I would, by the way, like to send her perhaps a better microphone setup if there's some way of doing that. But that's not the main issue here. And Liz, I'm sure someone else has probably made this point to you, but it's better that you get the information out than you worry about the sound quality. True.
This is Joseph Schwartz. He owned a nursing home empire called Skyline with facilities in 11 states. Schwartz stole $38 million from the paychecks of his employees, money that was supposed to cover their health care and retirement benefits. Schwartz pleaded guilty to tax fraud, and in April of this year, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. But last week, Donald Trump granted him a full pardon after he served just 3 months of his sentence. This is a strange pardon even for Trump, because back in April, Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney, Aileen issued a press release publicly thanking all of the agents and investigators who helped put Schwartz in prison.
So there's a brief yay for Aileen Haba. She did the right thing there. Schwartz, they show a very disheveled picture of him, but very interesting. And just a lousy crime to begin with, not only, of course, because it's a fraud crime, but stealing the pensions and health care funds for the people who, do the very difficult work of caring for people in assisted living facilities. And, those guys should be getting paid the premium. And it should be, the hedge fund money shouldn't be going to hedge funders who just, roll the dice and gambling on this big money. But we underpay our care workers, underpay our teachers, just generally speaking. We all know that that's the case. And then on top of it, you steal their money. And then you steal their money and you get caught and you go to prison. And then you use that money to buy a lobbying campaign to get yourself not only let out of prison early, but pardoned entirely. It's dirty, dirty, dirty stuff. And I just wanted to kind of mention that along the way. All right. And now, as it turns out, so as she says, he gets a full pardon after serving just 3 months of his 3-year sentence here. But there's more.
So why did Schwartz get a pardon? Trump hasn't told us, but here's what we know.
He may not know.
Earlier this year, Schwartz paid 2 lobbyists $960,000 to seek a pardon for him. We know that because the lobbyists filed this disclosure form, which is required by law.
That's
so
good.
Who are these lobbyists? Their names are Jack Berkman and Jacob Wohl.
What? And it doesn't strike her as entirely crazy right off the bat. I mean, I think she just has a good courtroom demeanor. She knows who they are and she knows where she's going with this. Do you remember Jack Berkman and Jacob Wohl?
They are far-right conspiracy theorists and convicted felons. They're known for elaborate scams, including several failed attempts to frame public figures for phony sexual assaults.
You remember that they did this with Elizabeth Warren, among others. Remember that one?
During the 2020 presidential election, Berkman and Wohl ran a voter intimidation campaign targeting black communities. They made
nice.
Tens of thousands of robocalls spreading disinformation intended to scare people out of voting. They were convicted of felony election fraud charges in Michigan and Ohio.
Election fraud? Oh no, isn't that the worst thing ever? Like also child sex trafficking, which also you guys are guilty of, but never mind, and define that anyway, and maybe 15 is okay or whatever.
They were also fined over $6 million by federal and state authorities. But now, things are looking up for these 2 con artists. Trump's pardon of Joseph Schwartz has put nearly $1 million into their pockets. Is this a quid pro quo for their efforts to help Trump win the 2020 election? I don't know. But what I do know is that we now have convicted fraudsters lobbying for pardons on behalf of other convicted fraudsters, and it seems to be working. This incredible corruption of the pardon power is flying under the radar. You can help raise awareness by sharing this post and by asking your elected reps to demand accountability for presidential pardons.
Yeah, and you should. And it's a pretty good one there. So we have convicted fraudsters lobbying. By the way, the convicted fraudsters are lobbying another convicted fraudster to use their pardon power to let a third convicted fraudster out of jail early. Get out of jail free card for convicted fraudsters. It's the sort of thing that they're one of the reasons that we some states say, well, let's not allow our convicted felons to vote, because of course if our convicted felons, once they get out of jail and have paid their debt to society, are allowed to vote, they'll vote for other convicted felons who will do things like campaign on the use of their pardon power to let other friendly convicted felons go. And we can't have that, although we do have that. But anyway, the whole point is something. But yes, she puts it pretty well. And as I was saying, that shows up in David Kurtz's TPM summary that we were just reading. The corruption pardon edition, I guess, is the last entry in the roundup. The right-wing provocateurs Jack Berkman and Jacob Wohl, convicted in Ohio and awaiting sentencing in Michigan for racist robocalls, were paid $960,000 by former nursing home magnate Joseph Schwartz for helping seek a presidential pardon. Schwartz, sentenced earlier this year to 3 years for defrauding the government of $38 million. Pardoned by Trump on November 14th after serving only three months. Schwartz is not the only client paying Berkman and Wohl for pardon help, as Notice has reported. And I guess now we got to take a look at that, too, because those guys are notorious with us, certainly. And again, I don't mean to do this to you first thing in the morning, but, it does make you wonder, why do we get up and go to work? Why do we do anything when you could instead be Jacob Wohl just faking your way through life and getting $1 million payoffs left and right? It's just not right. It really isn't. It's very discouraging. And of course, never mind the layer of it that Joseph Schwartz gypped the government out of, and I guess we're not supposed to say that either. Somebody warned me at some point. That's actually, derived from the word gypsy, so you don't want to be using that one. And you don't really want to be using the word gypsy either, as it turns out. So, okay. Ripped off the government to the tune of $38 million in tax fraud, which, Trump loves to bring that up as a talking point. I got to stop. We're going to punish somebody else for ripping off. They're ripping off the government, ripping off the American people. But what about this guy? Oh, yeah, well, to hell with that. And it'd be interesting. It's a good question Liz poses there. Is it a quid pro quo for helping Trump with his 2020 election that they get to pocket this $1 million? They do owe $6 million in fines to the government. But as it happens, the government is also Donald Trump. And he may say, don't worry about it. Keep the change. And so there's another $6 million we're not getting as a result of more fraudsters being involved with Donald Trump. So let me look at this one here. Now I'm going to look over at the Notice article. When is this from? October 31st. So Halloween. Ooh, spooky. Super rich in prison. Lobbyists want to help you score a Trump pardon. That's a good and lucrative business, I guess. Notice has identified a new crop of wealthy lawbreakers who are paying K Street professionals top dollar to woo the president. Taylor Giorno and Jasmine Wright wrote this for Notice. And they got a list of people. There's a rapper, there's a scam pack operator, a former utilities executive. These are just a few of the people participating in the flourishing presidential pardon economy, where wealthy convicts of all stripes are paying lobbyists big money to potentially score them enduring freedom. Operation Enduring Freedom. Cool. From President Donald Trump. Notice identified 6 previously unreported individuals who have recently hired lobbyists to help them seek pardons from Trump. Among them, Anne Pramagiore, I guess, Pramagiore, Anne Pramagiore, the former CEO of Illinois utility giant Commonwealth Edison, who paid Crossroads Strategies $80,000 last quarter for advising on public policy and legislative matters relevant to the pardon process. There's no legislative matter relevant to that, but okay. Pramagiore was convicted on 9 charges related to an alleged bribery scheme involving former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan and sentenced on July 21st to 2 years in prison, days after she hired Crossroads Strategies to advise on the pardon process. And in photo illustration here of her, Pramaggiore, who is set to report to prison on December 1st, is appealing her conviction under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act after a trial court vacated the 4 bribery charges. And of course, we did read the other day, or mention the other day, that Trump was instructing Bondi to basically stop prosecuting or cut back on prosecutions under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So maybe it was aimed at that. And maybe that has a legislative strategy involved. Crossroads Strategies directed questions about Pramaggiore's case to advisor Mark Herr, Herr, who told Notice Ann Pramaggiore was wrongly convicted and is appealing her case to the 7th Circuit. At the same time, she's exploring all options in pursuit of justice. Whoops, oh well. Including the possibility of a pardon, which really isn't. Clients also are flocking to Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall of J.M. Berkman and Associates, lobbyists who themselves pleaded guilty in 2022 to telecommunications fraud as part of an illegal robocall scheme, to lobby for pardons and on, quote, DOJ issues. Their client list includes rapper Boosie Badass. Is that right? Well, you know. These names are chosen intentionally. Spelled a little funny, too, which I appreciate. Boosie Badazz. Real name, Torrance Ivy Hatch Jr., which is also very interesting all by itself, who in August pleaded guilty to federal gun charges and hired J.M. Berkman and Associates this month to lobby, that would be October, the White House for a presidential pardon. Not even on my radar, but why not? J.M. Berkman and Associates also raking in big money from 2 more previously unreported clients. The firm received $960,000, as you know, from Joseph Schwartz. No more to add to that one. And they also have a client, Tim McPhee, who in August pleaded guilty to charges related to a multi-million-dollar investment scheme and has paid the firm $160,000 since the end of 2024 to lobby on, quote, DOJ issues. Berkman did not respond to requests for comment, including whether DOJ issues include federal pardons. Schwartz, McPhee, and their respective lawyers didn't respond to requests for comment. Meanwhile, a convicted scam pack operator, William Tierney, who in 2018 pleaded guilty to defrauding tens of thousands of donors, paid the Vogel Group $100,000 during this year's second quarter. The Vogel Group told Notice it was not authorized to discuss the case, and Tierney did not respond to an emailed request for comment. In 2 other previously unreported cases where individuals hired lobbyists for pardon work, it's not clear who exactly they are or what their cases entail. Efforts to connect the Vogel Group, or rather with Vogel Group, client Komal Patel, who in August hired the firm to lobby for clemency and paid $100,000 last quarter, were unsuccessful. The Adomi Advisory Group disclosed receiving a total of $20,000 during the 4th quarter of 2024 and the 1st quarter of 2025 to lobby to commute the sentence of the son of an individual named Dr. Shalfdin Amuwo. All right. Johanna LeBlanc, a partner at the firm and a lobbyist on the account, did not respond to requests for comment. While pardon lobbying is not itself a new phenomenon, K Street insiders have observed an uptick in interest in this type of work since Trump took office, and lobbyists who are close to Trump are doing particularly well in the presidential pardon economy. I guess I would say, and I assume that they'll argue at some point, it's not that it's a new thing to hire people to help you lobby for a pardon. It's that usually it was such a long shot that most people didn't bother unless they had an extremely strong case for a pardon. But now just run-of-the-mill defendants who are guilty or even pleaded guilty but who have lots of money to burn are just saying, maybe I could get one, because it's not hard to get them. It's indiscriminate. Trump says he doesn't even know who he's pardoning, and a lot of times it just comes down to what he sees on Fox TV. That's the old school way of doing it. Now you just pay a lobbyist as somebody who Trump likes. They show up at Pervalago for a dinner and they say, hey, I need you to pardon a guy. Yeah, sure. Give it to my guy and I'll sign it. And who's the guy? Ed Martin. So he doesn't look at them either. Checkmate Government Relations, helmed by Donald Trump Jr.'s friend Ches McDowell, reported receiving $450,000 last quarter to lobby the White House on executive relief for the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Binance, which in 2023 agreed to pay more than $4 billion to resolve a Justice Department investigation. Trump issued a controversial pardon last week for Binance founder Changpeng Zhao, who previously pleaded guilty to violating federal anti-money laundering laws. And just in case you were thinking, oh, that's just run-of-the-mill stuff, you should probably, understand that reportedly part of the money laundering was funding for Hamas. So, to the extent that they have any interest at all in Middle East peace or defeating or disarming or destroying Hamas, they've just pardoned the guy who is funneling, millions of dollars to their work. So, I love your work, Hamas, apparently, says what's his name? Zhao, Zhao. Okay, just, pointing that out. That's the kind of guy that Trump is pardoning, although he doesn't know he did it. Law firm Baker Hostetler disclosed receiving $30,000 from Zhao personally to lobby for executive relief during the second quarter. Separately, $260,000 from Binance during the first 3 quarters of 2025 to lobby on a range of issues, including executive relief from the executive office of the president. So I don't know why they bill it separately, but they do. Then there's Roger Ver, V-E-R, also known as Bitcoin Jesus. And why not be Bitcoin Jesus? All right. Trump advisor Roger Stone registered to lobby on the U.S. government prosecution of Roger Ver after Ver agreed this month to pay nearly $50 million as part of a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice to resolve charges of tax evasion. But getting pardoned from deferred prosecution? Come on, really? But a lot of these people are seeking their pardons before they even report to prison, which is weird. I mean, it's a good idea. I wouldn't want to report to prison either, but it's just a get out of jail free card at this point. And not free. It's $960,000. Stone disclosed receiving $600,000 from Ver during the year's first quarter for work related to, quote, ending the exit tax and reform of cryptocurrency tax policy. Stone has not reported receiving additional funds since, but continues to be retained by Ver, according to federal lobbying records. Even Trump's former bodyguard, Keith Schiller, is getting in on the action. Wow. He and his firm, Javelin Advisors, registered to lobby for executive relief for Fred Daibes, D-A-I-B-E-S, who was convicted last year of bribing former Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and his wife with gold bars and other luxury goods, and reported receiving $1 million during the first quarter of this year. Greg Lindbergh, an insurance executive who last year pleaded guilty to fraud and money laundering, also hired Javelin this summer to lobby for an executive pardon. Stone declined to comment. Checkmate Government Relations, Schiller and Teresa Guillen, Guillen, the Baker Hostetler lobbyist on the Zhao and Binance account, did not respond to requests for comment. While revealing federal lobbying disclosures only provide a snapshot of the pardon work being done in Washington, which is driven by lawyers that may or may not meet the legal criteria to register under the Lobbying Disclosure Act. Peter Tickton, Trump's former lawyer who has advocated for pardons for January 6th rioters and Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, told Notice he'd been offered $1 million to represent a client. The fact that people are charging a lot of money, that's because lawyers charge a lot of money. That's the quote. Wow. Well, he's a heavy thinker here. The fact that people are charging a lot of money, that's because lawyers charge a lot of money, said Tickton, who has his own slate of clients he's working to get pardoned. It's not as though they're charging a lot for pardons and everything else is a lower cost. It's not as though we're selling influence because we don't have influence, he added, defending some parts of the pardon economy that are fully above board. What we have is trust. Which is a totally different thing from influence, obviously. Come on. $1 million, that's smooth. It's not influence peddling, it's trust peddling. $1 million can be just a starting point for some seeking support. Sources told Notice, wealthy, well-connected people in legal trouble have good reason to believe Trump will give them an audience, particularly if they're supported, cheered, or otherwise flattered, or if they have flattered the president. And it's a good point. And that's what makes the pardon economy now different. It actually works. Almost never did in the past. Trump has already issued about 1,700 acts of clemency since returning to the White House, starting on Inauguration Day when he issued a full, complete, and unconditional pardon for nearly 1,500 individuals, as you know, related to January 6th. And earlier this month, that is to say October, Trump commuted the prison sentence of convicted fraudster and former Representative George Santos, both a former representative and a convicted fraudster, who was, of course, 3 months into a 7-year stay behind bars. 3 people familiar with the pardon process and interviewed this month by Notice predicted that Trump will pardon many more people this year. It's very, very lucrative. But pardon-related factions are also forming within and outside of the White House. Some of the people in Trump's orbit want to slow the pardon process down, concerned of the network that is financially benefiting off the pardon business.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we continue down the rabbit hole? It's a long article, this Notice piece, but we'll just continue the train of thought here because there's more to it. Some people, as we were saying, in Trump's orbit want to slow the pardon process down, concerned of, instead of about, the network that is financially benefiting off the pardon business. They are particularly, in many cases, many particularly scummy people involved in that because that's what works. You need to have somebody who has Trump's ear, and those people are particularly scummy people. And basically they just set whatever price they want. I'll mention to the president at dinner at Mar-a-Lago that you need a pardon, and it might even work. So what's that worth to somebody who's, incredibly rich, probably because of all the money they stole, and in some cases not. Some cases they have their money for other reasons. People in the entertainment industry, people who are hedge fund millionaires, whatever. Is it worth dropping $1 million here or there with for the possibility of a pardon? Again, used to be that the answer was no. It would be $1 million wasted. But now all it takes is, lightning to strike. You catch Trump in a moment of delirium, or you don't. You don't catch Trump at all. You catch Stephen Miller, and you just say this will be good for various reasons. Whether that's money, political wins, what have you, owning the libs. If you get that in front of Stephen Miller, he'll take care of it. And Trump may have no idea. So anyway, yes, so there's this growing concern of the network of people financially benefiting from this. A senior administration official told Notice that the White House is aware of the growing pardon ecosystem and argued that there are strong procedures in place to vet applications and approve pardons for those who qualify. But that is a lie, of course. Though there used to be, in previous administrations, it was the case that there are strong procedures in place to vet applications, and they don't exist anymore. They also told Notice that the president was not personally aware of the burgeoning pardon economy, a claim corroborated by a source close to Trump. I can't really believe that would be the case. Nothing would interest him more about pardons than the burgeoning pardon economy. There are some people around the president who want him to ramp up his clemency efforts as soon as he enters the second year of his 4-year term to take advantage of his lame duck status and commitments to override what they see as a cascade of prosecutorial overreach from the previous administration. It underscores the reality that the White House, not the Department of Justice, as was traditionally the case, is now the epicenter of pardons. Yes, they emanate from the White House because it's the president who hands them out, but it used to be the case that essentially the DOJ would advise him very carefully and cautiously, making recommendations on who to pardon and who not to pardon, and they just bypass them entirely now. The DOJ for decades oversaw the process almost exclusively and typically prioritized federal felons who showed signs of rehabilitation and growth while incarcerated, as Notice reported back in June. Even so, the traditional path to a presidential pardon, the Office of the Pardon Attorney, is still processing applications during the government shutdown, the Department of Justice told Notice. It's not really all that interesting, but okay. Among the things that is unique about the current environment is the perception, and I think it's probably accurate, that instead of kind of a single path, you now have a broader array of paths into that process. One source familiar with the process told Notice that's very gently put as well. Strategic. In the White House, the process is carried out by fewer than 10 aides who present the president with pardon suggestions. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is a gatekeeper, allegedly, who typically decides who can present such cases to the president. Typically, it has been the White House counsel, David Warrington, DOJ pardon attorney Ed Martin, and that really just pollutes the process top to bottom, or pardon czar Alice Johnson. Who's that? Why do they exist? I don't know. Who all have their own various lists with distinct interests, sources close to the process tell Notice. The White House did not respond for comment. Tickton, emphasizing the relationship-oriented nature of this business, said that people within the administration, such as Martin, are able to make a recommendation to the president because they know I'm not bringing in somebody who's going to hurt a 5-year-old child. Do they? Tickton sticks to clients who, in his view, are victims of the weaponization of justice or overzealous prosecutors. Senior officials temporarily slowed the pardon process down, creating a 4-month hiatus of the president approving pardons, according to two sources. Part of the concern was over the optics of who might be profiting from the pardon industry, as NBC News first reported. A second person familiar with the process said that the White House was tentatively planning to unveil a slate of pardons near the 4th of July weekend with a liberation theme, but missed the day. Whoops, Trump and paperwork. Didn't work. A third source with knowledge of the pardon scheduling denied that unreported detail, telling Notice that the pardon process was never intentionally slowed down. The challenge had always been carving out time in the president's incredibly busy schedule. July 4th weekend was jam-packed with the president signing the one big beautiful bill following his efforts to get it across the finish line, they added. And, since he doesn't even sign the damn things or have any knowledge of them, it doesn't take any more time to do that. That seems ridiculous. It's a bad excuse. The fact that they missed the day, by the way, that's got to be incredibly disheartening. Well, I guess I would say under the normal process where people who are like literally awaiting justice for decades and have been behind the bars either without cause or improperly or have rehabilitated themselves, as they mentioned earlier, and were particularly deserving of a pardon. Imagine not getting that pardon and remaining in prison unjustly, let's say, because, we missed the day and we wanted to do it on July 4th because there was a freedom theme to be done. So, F it. That person has to stay in jail another year so we can get around to July 4th again. But that's not what's happening anyway, and the people are undeserving, so who cares? I guess, is one way of looking at it. All right. I'm going to take a look, just skimming Charlie Savage's article about what Aileen Cannon is up to, because that seems incredibly important, but it also is rather lengthy, and I'm wondering whether our time today is better spent on some other things. But as I think about what we're going to be doing with Thursday and Friday and think about pre-recording things, the New York Times' look or Charlie Savage's look at what's happening with Aileen Cannon might be worth our time for might be better used in a pre-recorded show. for those purposes. Let's see. You know what? There's any number of small bore issues which would be wise to include in all of this. But, you know what? Let me throw in this bit here. That also reminds me that Marcy Wheeler did a nice report in video format, something she's moving into more frequently here. Something we ought to think about, I guess, at some point, except you don't want to see what's going on in my house. I mean, quite honestly, she says to hell with it and goes for it anyway with no special backdrop. And, there's just a little bit of extra authenticity that goes with that. But I don't know if I'm up for that. Anyway, she did a great explainer of sorts on the so-called peace plan that they're working on as between Russia and Ukraine. She refers to it as the peace plan, PIECE, for some reason. I don't know. I guess because they get to keep a piece of Ukraine, according to this plan. But interestingly, pointing out that against everyone's better instincts, the truth is that you have to regard Marco Rubio as the I guess it's a relative term, the good guy in all of this, in that he's been the only one that's been, I think, honest. And that's the determination here in deciding that he's a good guy, being honest about where the plan came from. Everybody else has been saying, oh, no, it's not Russian authored, it's ours. And Marco Rubio has been clear about it and saying, no, it actually isn't. It's Russian written. And in fact, Marcy refers to it as having been fairly clearly translated from Russian. Like there's just construction to the English language version of it that gives that away, which, I think we can all imagine what sorts of tips there might be there. But it's real interesting. And apparently Marco Rubio spent his weekend speaking to important and influential senators on foreign relations to set the record straight as to where the plan came from, and that it isn't the American proposal after all. And yet, at the same time, the State Department, if I understood her correctly, is saying that it is an American plan, which is weird because he's the Secretary of State. And by the way, the National Security Advisor, as I recall, among like 10 other hats that he currently wears. And it's just interesting to me that there could be a internal fight within the administration over something like a peace plan for Ukraine, where the dominant player isn't the Secretary of State / National Security Advisor. How could that possibly be? And the answer is this effing administration is full of idiots. I don't know what else to say about that. Maybe, I wonder if I could find and grab and play Marcy's bit here, because it wasn't super, well, I think it was still, it was like a good 6 minutes, as I recall. But anyway, I'll see if I can't find that video for you. I can. We'll just make a point of doing it so that you can take a moment and review it yourself. It would be ridiculous, I think, to just hand over a 6-minute segment. Not that it would be ridiculous for one of you guys to send a 6-minute segment on it. It would be ridiculous to steal Marcy's and just play it, although I'm sure she's glad for the exposure. She'll be getting the exposure this way anyway. She doesn't need exposure from me, of course. I think she's got a far bigger audience. So anyway, part of that is probably because she puts out these video shorts. People love video shorts, or at least so I'm told. All right, let's see. Where might we want to go next in terms of including a different story for the day? It's just so many things happening that I just have to make this decision on the fly over which ones we'll show you. Okay, I'm going to say, let me jump back a little bit here in the list to some of the smaller stories, because we are getting toward the end of the show. This one from the Kansas City Star. So I am pretty sure we haven't discussed this one yet. A piece from Kacen Bayless, Kacen, and This under the headline of Missouri Attorney General, it's always worrisome when we're talking about an Attorney General, involves ICE, in push to halt anti-gerrymandering group. And this one ticks a lot of boxes, but also makes you say, what? Did I understand that correctly? It doesn't seem to make any sense. That's right, it doesn't. Let's see what this is about. Missouri Attorney General Catherine Hanaway, and it's good to learn the names of new Rogues Gallery members, on Thursday involved federal immigration agents in her push to halt a campaign seeking to strike down the state's congressional map. Wow, this has it all. Hanaway, a Republican, of course, who else would do this, alleged in a pair of social media posts that a firm working with the campaign to collect signatures to, to strike down the state's congressional map, almost certainly gerrymandered in favor of Republicans, obviously. So she's put up 2 social media posts that a firm working with this campaign to collect signatures to oppose the new map was, quote, reportedly employing illegal aliens. Okay, well, come on now. First of all, probably not. And secondly, the language wars they're involved in. Hanaway wrote that her office, quote, referred this matter to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. So this is I'll give you this, an evil genius style inventive way of getting your opponents off the street. The Attorney General did not provide any evidence to support her claims. A Hanaway spokesperson did not respond to a request or a series of questions from the Star seeking more information. If we were to immediately run out of time or not make it to the end of the article, if I understand what's happening here very quickly, the group is lobbying for, I guess, maybe some sort of get something on the ballot, maybe, or they're collecting signatures for just a petition, just as an organizing event of some kind, but to fight back against Republican gerrymandering of the congressional map in Missouri. And rather than allow them to try their hand at it and see if they can succeed and do they have the support of the people, we're going to just tell ICE, all the people gathering signatures are illegal aliens, so wherever you see them gathering signatures, you should tackle them and arrest them, and that way they won't be able to gather the signatures that they're looking for. It's inventive, I'll give it that. The allegations came as the campaign, called People Not Politicians, has faced a series of attacks from state officials, national Republican groups, and mysterious consulting contracts. Campaign supporters have framed Hanaway's posts as another attempt to halt Missourians from holding a statewide referendum on the congressional map. Then Missouri is just really loving negating voter referendums, aren't they? They do this with healthcare expansion and various other things. So, now I guess moving into the gerrymandering field. What the Attorney General did, seemingly sicking ICE on people exercising their First Amendment rights, isn't about the law. It's about political intimidation and thuggery, said Richard Von Glahn, Glahn, the campaign's executive director. Hanaway's social media posts were aimed at Advanced Micro-Targeting, or AMT, a company working with the campaign to collect signatures across the state. The campaign is working with AMT and volunteers to force a statewide referendum on the map. Von Glahn said that Hanaway did not contact AMT before she made her allegations, which he said were false. She put this out without having done anything, Von Glahn said, which is why we know it's not a legit investigation. It's about intimidation. And some might say a trial run for what about if the Attorney General of Missouri and or many other Republican Attorney Generals of other states simply declare in advance of November of 2026 that illegal aliens are trying to vote and anyone brown seen in line to vote ought to be tackled by ICE and we'll sort it all out later. Well, vote early and vote by absentee ballot and vote by mail if you can, because they don't ordinarily, it's a lot harder for them to find you and tackle you in your house in greater numbers, whereas if you're just standing outside waiting in line to go vote, they can go around and tackle you there because they see where you are and they can go to centralized locations. But also, if you are voting early, you can get your ballot in, and you got several chances to try. If for some reason you went to pick up your ballot at the local campaign or voter registrar's office and take it home with you and mail it back in, and they nab you on the way there. If you're doing it early, there's some chance that you might get out of detention in time to still cast that ballot, although not much, because they'll probably be looking to hold on to you until the balloting process is over. But at least you get a couple of chances at it. Or if, let's say, you're headed to the office to go and do it, and then there's a roadblock from ICE in your way before you get to the office, you can always try again tomorrow. But if you wait for Election Day and they tackle you and nab you, they only got to hold you for a couple hours before you've missed your chance to vote. All right. So, as they said, she put this out without having done any investigation. It's all about intimidation. Billy Rogers, the company's president and founder, also called the allegations false in an interview. AMT uses the national company E-Verify for its employees and conducts a pretty extensive background check. So, Republicans have demanded for years that employers use E-Verify. So here they're an employer. They use E-Verify. Doesn't matter. The Attorney General of Missouri is just going to allege that you're hiring undocumented workers anyway. It's not true, Rogers said. We're a real company that does real business and we abide by the law. You'd think that the Attorney General would be pleased with that, but I guess not. The spokesperson for ICE did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Hanaway's allegations have also been roundly criticized by Democrats and other supporters of the campaign. Unelected, ultra-partisan Attorney General making stuff up to interfere with Missourians' constitutional right to hold politicians accountable. House Minority Leader Ashley Aune, A-U-N-E, I don't know how that's pronounced, a Kansas City Democrat, wrote in a post that quoted Hanaway's claims. Some have also mocked Hanaway's claim that the referendum seeks to, quote, undermine the will of the people's elected representatives, which is a twist on the campaign's slogan that the will of the people should decide the state's congressional districts instead of politicians. But some social media users have touted Hanaway's claims. The Missouri Republican Party also reshared both posts. The top Republican in the Missouri Senate, in a statement provided by a spokesperson, used Hanaway's allegations to highlight concerns about illegal immigration, saying that Missourians, quote, deserve a system that is secure, transparent, and protected from outside manipulation, which is, of course, what you're doing, but yours is the white kind, so it's okay. I know General Hanaway, another of these idiots referring to an attorney general as General Hanaway, would verify this. I know she would. She did. She lied already. She would do it again. And I think it brings to light one of the legislature's concerns, said Senate President Pro Tem Cindy O'Loughlin, a Shelbina Republican. If illegal immigrants are being used to interfere in Missouri elections, that's a serious issue. But if they're not, lying about it is also a serious issue. Another Senate Republican, reached by phone, said he had not seen Hanaway's claims. Says, Mike Johnson serves in the as a Republican state senator in Missouri. I didn't even realize that. If it's true, I'm glad she's doing it, said Senator Mike Sierpiot, I'm guessing, Sierpiot, a Lee's Summit Republican. And if not, we'll figure it out. That's really interesting. If it's true, I'm glad she's doing it. And if not, well, when they get out of prison, we'll apologize to them for not having the right to vote. Inside the Missouri campaign is the next section. Hanaway's allegations were not the first attempt to cast doubt on the campaign. The Republican Attorney General has also filed a federal lawsuit seeking to block the referendum, arguing that only lawmakers have the power to redraw the state's congressional districts. Meanwhile, Republican Secretary of State Denny Hoskins faces a lawsuit that alleges that he illegally delayed the campaign by refusing to accept its paperwork, and cast doubt on the validity of roughly 90,000 signatures. The intense energy surrounding the campaign comes after a chaotic fall in which Missouri redrew the state's congressional maps under pressure from President Donald Trump. So, by the way, keep it up, California, keep it up, Virginia, keep it up, every state under Democratic control looking to counter this move, even though other Republican states are now declining to participate, and the Texas redraw is in some jeopardy. But you have to keep going because you really don't know what's going on in some of these crazier Republican states. And even if they're all defeated, who cares? Because quite honestly, Democrats have been too lax in exercising the same muscle over the course of decades anyway. 6 of the state's 8 districts are currently represented by Republicans, while Democrats hold 2, one in Kansas City and the other in St. Louis. The new map, signed by Republican Governor Mike Kehoe, is intended to allow Republicans to control 7 districts as Republicans nationwide seek to maintain control of Congress in the 2026 election. I guess it won't help them that murdery Trader Green is jumping ship, by the way. We haven't really discussed all of that, but we'll have more opportunities, even if pre-recorded, during the rest of the week. The map takes direct aim at Kansas City and longtime Democratic U.S. Representative Emanuel Cleaver. I remember when he was brand new. I feel so old. Carving the city's voters into 3 Republican-leaning districts. It also slices more than 70,000 minority voters out of Cleaver's district, a move that faces fierce criticism in Kansas City. People Not Politicians launched its referendum campaign shortly after the vote and almost immediately began collecting signatures to strike down the map. Referendum campaigns outlined in the Missouri Constitution allow voters to challenge most bills passed by state lawmakers. Campaigners have until December 11th, or 90 days after the legislature adjourned, to collect enough signatures in at least 6 of Missouri's 8 congressional districts to force a November 2026 statewide vote. The campaign must collect the amount of signatures that equals 5% of voters in each of those districts based on numbers from the most recent election for governor. That number would be around 106,000, according to Missouri's Secretary of State's office. That's good, and I love that sort of information. That's actually the end of the article there. It's hard to tell sometimes when you've gotten to the end of an article these days with all the pop-up ads. But I always appreciate that procedural information. Good fact stuff to know. But yeah, what a move, right? So if you thought that you should let up from the gas pedal in California because Texas was on hold, first of all, Texas is back on track. And secondly, even if they weren't, Missouri is following them up with this nonsense. And this is really just super insulting and dangerous all by itself. And who knows what else they could use this same tactic for in the future, or are using right now, for that matter. All right. I thought that was very interesting. Let me open up a couple other things and see what else we can take a look at. Here's another issue that we haven't revisited in a while. But Jamil Jaffer, director of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University and executive editor at Just Security, by the way, adds this note. Tomorrow morning, and when was this? Is this yesterday? No, this was Sunday. So Monday morning, I guess, the D.C. Circuit will consider, or in fact did consider, whether Trump violated the First Amendment. Oh, no. Of course he did. Violated the First Amendment. But which specific violation of the First Amendment are we talking about? The one in which he ejected the AP News from the White House press pool after it refused to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Remember that one? Very glad, Jamil says, that the AP is fighting on this, and notes or links to his Knight Foundation, or what do they call the place? I don't know. Knight First Amendment Institute blog about the issue, in which he grabs, I guess, the highlight for us, saves us some time, and gives us the screen grab. Reads, of course, the real fight here isn't about what things should be called, but about who decides. Who should decide how the press describes the world? That's a good question, a good framing for it. Trump's answer is Trump, of course, but this is absurd and intolerable. Today, Trump demands that the AP rename the Gulf of Mexico, but tomorrow he will demand that Ukraine be called Russia. Oh, that's an interesting peace plan for them. That immigrants be called terrorists. That's happening now. And that the 2020 election be called a fraud. Plainly, the free press can't cede to the White House the right to decide how reality should be described. A press that ceded that right would not be free or serving the public or worth defending. And I think a very good point, and I'm glad we got a chance to bring that one up. That brings us about to the wind-up of the show. Is there anything else I want to add here? Yeah, we got more information about the background of how that supposed Ukraine-Russia peace plan made it to the hands of the administration, and who wrote it and how you know. And let's see. I think that's probably about it in terms of what we're going to be able to fit in today. I'm just skimming to see if there's any other quick hits here among the various Blue Sky posts that I happen to... Oh, yes, right. There was this one. We discussed this a little bit, and let me roll our outro music as I read this. This from Unusual Whales Blue Sky account. They, as they say, skeet. About markets and political corruption over at Unusual Whales. Breaking news. This was back on November 18th. It's just been sitting around for a while. Deputy White House Chief of Staff James Blair, I don't hear about that guy a lot, said the administration is eyeing ways to give millions of Americans $2,000 dividend checks from tariff revenue, but looking for ways to do it without congressional approval, according to Bloomberg. I just wanted to put that out there because we mentioned a couple of days ago, I think about back when this was happening, so a week or two ago, that they were floating the idea of these dividend checks and saying, well, one, of course, Justin Wolfer's pointing out you don't have enough money collected from the tariffs to actually do that. But two, that would require some congressional involvement, probably, right? And I guess once they found out that was the case and it wasn't going to work, they started floating the idea, maybe we can do this unilaterally, which only brings us around to the idea that Trump can impose taxes unilaterally and he can refund those taxes unilaterally. That doesn't seem like the kind of vision that the founders had for our American republic. But remember, it's a republic, not a democracy. But even so, it wouldn't really matter. And it's not either if he has the power to both impose and refund taxes at a whim. A personal slush fund for him to buy votes? I don't think so.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, we got at least one more live day coming this week tomorrow as Gregory joins us. For now, though, time to hand things over to Justice Button for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And guess what? He's got a lot of great information for you, too, about Bondi running away after being confronted over the collapse of the criminal indictments against Comey and Letitia James. Actually physically running away from questions? That'd be fun to watch.